Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Ghislaine Maxwell's case is being handled by the same unit that handled the Jeffrey Epstein case, and that is the Public Corruption Unit. Now, why would a sex crimes investigation be handed over to the Public Corruption Unit? Now, we've talked a little bit about this previously, but this is an article that I had archived from July of this year in Law and Crime, and they discuss this very topic. Why would the Public Corruption Unit be in charge of the Ghislaine Maxwell case? It could only mean that they have their sights set on some bigger fish, right? That would be why the Public Corruptions Unit would be involved. So you would think that their motivation is to try and get whatever dirt Ghislaine Maxwell and her associates have on whatever public officials currently in office or previously in office, so that those public officials can answer for their roles in Jeffrey Epstein's crime. Now, that's what it would look like, right? That's why you would think the Public Corruptions Unit would be involved. So it always was odd that the Public Corruption Unit was handling a sexual crimes case, because what they do is they have different units, right? They have like an organized crime division, they have the sex crimes division, they have, vice, you name it. And each one of those divisions has a specialty, and that's who the case gets passed to investigate most of the time, right? Well, in this case, it's a little bit different. In this case, it's the Public Corruptions Unit investigating sex crimes? Let's jump into this article and see what Law and Crime has to say. Headline: Ghislaine Maxwell's case being handled by SDNY Public Corruption Unit could spell trouble for U.S. elites. Author Colin Combacher. And that is definitely rings very true. The Public Corruptions Unit being involved has to spell trouble for those who were offering help to Jeffrey Epstein, financially or otherwise, who might have been in a public role. Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scumbag, and alleged groomer was finally located and arrested by federal authorities nearly a year to the day that Epstein himself was caught last summer. Now, also, this article is from July 2nd of this year, so it's a little bit older, but it is it gives us a good overview of the Public Corruption Unit and what their role here is. So I think it's a good idea to add it to the catalog. And again, it adds more context and puts a little bit more meat on that bone for us. While Maxwell was apprehended by agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation early Thursday in a small town of Bradford, New Hampshire, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York is handling the inquiry. As the result of a briefing on Thursday afternoon between Maxwell and the government, the SDNY will have unopposed jurisdiction. So that means that the SDNY has complete control of this case. They are 100% in the driver's seat when it comes to prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, 100% in the driver's seat when it comes to making sure that co-conspirators are brought down. They're in charge of who handles the case, etc., etc. The whole entire ball of wax is in their lap. That result was hardly a surprise, but the specific SDNY unit taking charge of the Maxwell case immediately raised some eyebrows. And remember, we talked at length about this with Jeffrey Epstein. The Public Corruptions Unit was involved in that as well, and there has always been the question of why. You would think that a case that involves human traffickers and sex crimes against children, etc., would be right in the wheelhouse of the sex crimes division. But here we are. And I think it's important that we discuss this, and I think it's important that it's brought up more. What it does, it kind of gives us a glimpse of the way the prosecution is looking to deal with this, in my opinion. Kind of a glimpse behind the curtain, right? An idea of what their plan of attack could be. During a press conference, acting U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss noted that the SDNY's public corruption unit, like the Epstein case before, be tasked with overseeing the prosecution. I think it's very important to state that this case is being handled pretty much identically to the way Epstein's case was handled as far as the unit overseeing it. So what I would think happened is the agents that were overseeing the Epstein case, they just all moved right into the Maxwell case after Epstein died and Maxwell was arrested. So it should have been a pretty seamless transition, right? And I would think that those same agents are digging deep now into Ghislaine Maxwell and using everything that they have learned previously in the Epstein case to guide them. I worked at SDNY and did sex trafficking cases, noted former federal and state prosecutor and current CNN legal analyst Ely Honig via Twitter. They do not run out of the public corruption unless there is some potential angle against a public official. And again, that stuff is important, right? These little tidbits. It's very uncommon for something like this to occur. All right. If you go and you look back at all of the cases that we have seen that have mimicked this case or have come close to the Epstein case, which aren't many, but you look at sex trafficking cases, et cetera, they do not run out of the public corruptions unit. Okay. So to me, that says that the prosecution has the goods on ex or current or both public officials in the United States of America. And I really hope that that is the case because guess what? It is time for these people who have been hidden and protected for so long to lose that status. The Department of Justice describes the unit on its website. The Public Corruption Unit works in close partnership with the FBI and other federal, state, and city investigative agencies to maintain and protect the integrity of all levels of government. The unit oversees the investigation and prosecution of corruption crimes committed by elected and appointed officials, government employees, and individuals and companies doing business with the city, state, and federal government. Corruption crimes investigated by the unit include bribery, embezzlement, and frauds committed against local, state, and federal government agencies. So basically what that's telling us is there are financial crimes up the wazoo here. These public officials who were accepting money from Jeffrey Epstein, what were they doing in return for that money? That's the real question. They were just getting money and Epstein was just giving it to them because he was a charitable cat. He just decided one day he's going to wake up and start doling out money to politicians and expect nothing on the flip side. You would have to be really naive to think that's how this works. We already know that Jeffrey Epstein was doling out cash. We know that it was happening in New Mexico. We know that it was happening in the Virgin Islands. And we know he has donated money to a who's list of politicians. I read the list of all of his donations without comment months ago here on the podcast. Maybe what I'll do is dig that episode out and repost it for those of you who have just joined the program. Because, everybody always says follow the money, right? Well, we have to do that. Where was he donating the money? Who was he donating the money to? And what was he getting in return for these political donations? Not very hard questions, right? The questions that the legacy media should have been asking since the beginning. But they haven't. And then they have the audacity to get on the internet, on Twitter, and rail people in the legacy media about independent content creators. Let's be real, okay? The whole entire premise of the Miami Herald's investigation was all about politics. If Acosta was never in office, that investigation never gets initiated, in my opinion. Point blank, period. That's right, I said it. Run home and tell that. Because it's quite obvious that they were looking for a political cudgel. And you see that just littered throughout this case. So many people Oh, it was this one. Oh, it was that one. Oh, it was my guy. It was your guy. I have news for you, all right? It was all of them. All of these people who were involved over the course of 4 presidents have some explaining to do, okay? A case like this ordinarily would not be staffed out of public corruption, Honig told Law and Crime. It would ordinarily be staffed out of what's known now as the Violent and Organized Crime Unit. So that's interesting too, the Violent and Organized Crime Unit, because we do know that this was a criminal enterprise, and we also know that this is obviously a RICO case. So it's interesting that the Organized Crime Unit is where this would usually go, but it ends up in public corruption instead? Pretty interesting, folks. It's very interesting to see how this is all played out, and it's also very interesting to see and to try and locate why it ended up in the public corruption unit's hands, because I think that's a big part of this case. I think it's a big missing piece, and if we can tie the knots together here, untie the knots here and piece everything together, I think that we'll have a better idea of what's going on and who the true target is, because I don't think the real target has been revealed yet. The Violent and Organized Crime Unit is where the SDNY's human and sex trafficking coordinators are located. The fact that it is staffed out of the public corruptions tells me that a public official, past or present, is involved in at least some capacity, Honig continued. Could mean a potential target, witness, or a potential co-conspirator. It could mean a lot of different things. 100%. We don't know what it means, right? We definitely don't know. Anyone who tells you that they do is blowing smoke up your ass. I have no idea, right? But I will tell you this. It is very odd, it is out of the ordinary, and I would not be shocked that when we see the dust start to clear and the smoke settle a little bit, what we will see is that there are people we would not expect involved in this, people we did not expect to actually have their names brought up. Those people are going to be called to account, I think. And I think it's going to shock a lot of people how this case turns. The Maxwell case is necessarily rife with speculation as part of the general Epstein story about a mysteriously wealthy entrepreneur who allegedly ran a global child sex trafficking enterprise for years. Not just child sex trafficking, human sex trafficking. Even if you were of age and you were trafficked by this man, that lessens what happened to you? It makes it any less disastrous for your life that you were abused at the hands of this man because you were 18? No, I'm sorry. In my opinion, that does not change it, okay? You were still abused. You were still trafficked by this man. So, I think it's important that we point out that it wasn't just a child sex trafficking ring. Of course it was that as well. But let's not forget the women who were of age who were also trafficked by this man. Generally untouched by law enforcement, Epstein, when finally caught, was given a sweetheart plea deal where he admitted to charges of soliciting prostitution from a minor. During his sentence, he was allowed to work from home and entertain female guests, while many of his unnamed co-conspirators were gifted an unprecedented and highly criticized non-prosecution agreement. And this is basically what it all comes down to, folks, right? This isn't just your regular case of a man who has power and was able to slide by. This is a case where not only was Epstein able to wiggle off of the hook, named and unnamed co-conspirators, all right? That just doesn't sit well with me. It never will. I am sick and tired of the two-tier justice system, and I am sick to death of people like Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators not facing the music for stuff like this. So, with the Public Corruptions Unit involved, I really, really, really hope that we see some of these politicians, prosecutors and otherwise, get their comeuppance at the end of the day. The U.S. attorney who ran that initial investigation and widely believed sham of a prosecution later threw up his hands, complaining that he couldn't really punish Epstein because of the serial offender's apparent ties with an unnamed intelligence agency. And again, the intelligence agency angle pops its ugly head up, right? And that we're talking about law and crime here. We're not talking about some shit rag bringing it up. And I think it's good that they bring it up here. It's important that we discuss the intelligence angle, okay? I mean, people that are so against the fact that this was an intelligence-run operation, they confuse me. We're talking about the CIA here, okay? Probably the most dastardly, disgusting group of individuals ever assembled in the history of the world, and that's not hyperbole, okay? These people, you really think they're above running a sex trafficking ring if it means they're going to get information and blackmail on some of their opponents or people that they think that they need to put the thumb to? Come on, folks. All the while, Bill Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, Donald Trump, Ehud Barak, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Prince Andrew, and other global elites were known associates of Epstein and/or Maxwell, or at least appeared with them in photographs, many maintaining their relationships with the duo even after Epstein's 2009 sentencing. And as you all know here, that is where I really go hard on these people. There is no excuse for being Jeffrey Epstein's friend, especially after the conviction. If you're his friend after the conviction, you are still associating with him. You are still running around with him. You have no defense. Okay? You do not have a leg to stand on when you're trying to defend your relationship with Epstein if you are still hanging out with him after he was convicted. Please shut your mouth and go to the back of the room. The involvement of the SDNY's Public Corruption Unit may suggest that some of the more high-profile government figures associated with Epstein and Maxwell may somehow be involved with the case. Or it may have something to do with the original deal Epstein received in Florida. I think that's a big part of it. I think that the prosecutors who prosecuted this case in Florida and those who were involved, they should be a little bit worried about what's coming down the pipe. The Public Corruption Unit was the unit that brought the original Epstein charges and thus these additional Maxwell charges, likely because of the involvement of public officials in Florida in giving Epstein the sweetheart plea deal a number of years ago, noted former SDNY deputy chief and current CNN legal analyst Jennifer Rogers. And again, folks, it all goes back to this plea deal, right? This plea deal is the real problem here. The plea deal is the thing that's holding everything up and stopping justice from occurring. And that plea deal was the baby of Alan Dershowitz, Gerald Lefcourt, Ken Starr, and the scumbag prosecutors in Florida who helped facilitate it. So without that plea deal, this is a whole different ballgame right now. My educated guess is that part of this investigation has involved whether any of those officials had done anything wrong, like accepting bribes in connection with that matter. In an email to Law and Crime, Rogers said the new charges were potentially bad news for anyone who may have been involved, but said it was unclear whether or not Maxwell herself would actually cooperate with the prosecution. Well, you all know how I feel about that. There is zero chance she's not going to cooperate, in my opinion. This lady knows the stakes, and she understands that there's going to be more charges coming down the pipe. Do you know why she knows that? Because she knows she's guilty, and she knows what she has done. So she understands that this is not all that's coming down the pipe. Ghislaine Maxwell is singing like a songbird right now, in my opinion. If she did, presumably, she would have information to share about other participants, Rogers said. The Public Corruption Unit is the right home for this case, even though a straight-up sex trafficking case would be handled out of the Organized and Violent Crimes Unit. But whatever we will see, any public officials charged remains to be seen, she added. And also, that doesn't mean that the Sex Crimes Division isn't working in conjunction with the Public Corruptions Unit. They're working together on this for sure. Mimi Roca, another former SDNY prosecutor and current Democratic nominee for Westchester County District Attorney, acknowledged the strange circumstances but cautioned not to read too much into the situation based on the facts available at present. I agree that it's very unusual to have a human trafficking case in the PC unit, she said in an email. But once the case was there originally, they wouldn't switch it now, even if there are not public figure targets. So I don't know what we can read that much into it standing alone. What do you mean switch it? It's a whole new case. It wasn't the Jeffrey Epstein case just moved over. I mean, I'm sure some of it was, but it's a whole new case. What, is Mimi Roca smoking that good herb before responding to these emails? She out there microdosing or something? According to a DOJ press release, Assistant U.S. Attorneys Alex Rossmiller, Allison Moe, and Maureen Comey are the personnel in charge of the prosecution. So, I'm not a huge fan of Maureen Comey, as I've stated several times. Her dad's a crook, a criminal, and a liar. And he's another one who believes that there's a two-tier justice system. So I have no use for people like that. So Maureen Comey, I'm not, a huge fan of what she has going on for sure. But when it comes to Allison Moe, I really dig the way Allison Moe has went about herself and handled herself so far in this case. And I think that moving forward, she is going to really give Chris Everdell and Ghislaine Maxwell's team an absolute beatdown in the courtroom. The most interesting question we have coming out of this article, though, is are there public officials who are facing questioning or perhaps even a criminal trial in the Jeffrey Epstein case? The answer, we still do not know. There are sealed indictments in this case, a grand jury still running. So, in my opinion, we will see indictments in this case. As far as speculating on who, outside of the core four and some of the other participants like Jean-Luc Brunel, I have no idea. But my gut tells me, and the evidence most certainly points to, public officials being caught up and maybe even prosecuted in this case. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, I'll be back later on. I hope you all have an amazing Saturday morning.